Hello and welcome to an updated presentation on the NIH Biosketches. Today we're going to be talking about the NIH Common Form Biosketch and the additional supplement. This is going to be for all NIH applications on or after January 25th, 2026. So those of you that are familiar with the current NIH Biosketch, I find that it's helpful to think about this new format with three different components. One is that the NIH is moving to require the common form, which is a standard biosketch used by many other federal agencies such as NSF. With that form, they are also requiring that you build and certify your Common Form Biosketch within the online Science CV platform, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And then to accommodate all of the NIH specific components, there is also an additional Biosketch supplement that will also be required. So before you get started, I find that it's helpful to have three things. First is make sure that you know or have your ERA Commons ID because you will need it to log in. In order to finalize or certify your Biosketch, you're going to have to link it with your ORCID ID. This presentation is not going to go into how to link it. There are plenty of online resources for that, but the Biosketch essentially cannot be finalized without this, so it's good to have this ahead of time. And then also making sure that your publications are in either My Bibliography through NCBI or in your ORCID ID account. Either way, just making sure that you have your publications in order because they will be automatically pulled into your Biosketch. So if you are not familiar with Science CV, it's been around for a number of years. It stands for the Science Experts Network Curriculum Vitae. This is an online platform that allows you to create biosketches and other support forms in different formats. So if you log in there now, you'll see that there's an NSF version, there's an NIH version, etc. One of the benefits is that if you have an administrator, you can assign them as a delegate. You can have multiple delegates to be able to edit and update your biosketch over time within the system. The major change, and we'll talk a little bit about it later, is that the administrative delegates cannot certify or finalize your biosketch. That has to be done by the user themselves. But another benefit, as I mentioned in the previous slide, is that the system automatically links to your My Bibliography, which pulls in publications from PubMed, and also whatever happens to be in your ORCID account as well. So to get started, the Science CV system gives you three options to building this biosketch. One is to use an external source, such as uploading a previous biosketch in another format. If you have used Science CV, you are able to use one of those existing documents to convert to the new format. Or if you've never been in Science CV, you don't have anything else, you can just start with a blank document. So just a heads up, I mentioned it's important to link your ORCID ID. This should be done before you start on building a biosketch because once you build it, if you realize that the ORCID ID is not linked, you'll probably have to start over from scratch. So just a heads up on that. I'm going to talk about each of the components, but before I do, I want to give a heads up on some of the major key differences for those of you that have a current or older version of the biosketch to the new one. So major difference number one, the professional preparation, or what used to be called education and training, now requires a start date in addition to the end date. So make sure you have that on hand. The personal statement previously was unlimited as long as the overall biosketch was no longer than 5 pages. Now it is limited to 3,500 characters total, although the biosketch itself has no page limit. The contributions to science, which are going to be in the biosketch supplement, is limited to 2,000 characters, which again, we'll talk about a little bit later. And then also in that supplement is the honor section, which is now limited to only 15 entries, and that must include your licensures or board certifications if you have them. So let's talk about the common form first. So the common form biosketch has essentially 4 different elements. The identifying information, which is just your name, file name, things like that. Again, professional preparation, what used to be called education and training, where you list where you went to school, what degrees you got, etc. The appointments and positions, you'll notice that the awards is no longer a component because that is being put on the supplement. And I just want to highlight, although it does not specify in the title, it does still require you to list scientific foreign appointments, etc. And then section C is the products section. So section C previously was called contributions to science. That has now been moved to the supplement, but the products section is where you will likely list your publications and other kinds of research products. So those of you that have had a Biosketch for many years, you might have remembered when the old format of the Biosketch for NIH allow you to cite different products or publications. So we're sort of going back to that with the common form. So let's talk about each of these elements individually. The identifying information is your organization, its location, your name. A lot of this information is going to be automatically input into your Biosketch from the system, because ScienceCV will link to your ORCID ID. It'll have your ERA Commons information. So a lot of this you will not have to put in yourself, but the position title, keep a pin in that because we're going to talk about it on the next slide. Section A is called professional preparation, as I mentioned. Same as last time, you just list all of your education and training in reverse chronological order. Benefit of the system, it will put it in that order for you based on your start and end dates. So as I mentioned earlier, new for this new format is that it does require you to have a start date for each of your professional preparations. So within the system, you are allowed to select whether your professional preparation is either a degree or training. And so some of this information may need to be added manually. So just be aware that this could take some time, but there is no limit to the number of professional preparations that you can list here. Appointments and positions is, again, reverse chronological order, same as last time. The rules really haven't changed too much. They really want you to list your academic, professional, institutional, whether those are full-time or part-time, whether you get paid or not paid. And then obviously you do have to disclose your foreign and domestic appointments. So here I want to point out what this means. Other than your primary institution, if you've had any other positions, whether they're paid or not, whether they're voluntary or not, you're required to disclose them up to 3 years only. So if you've had a position that's been over for more than 3 years and it's not at your current institution, you should not be listing that here. So hopefully it makes this list a little bit shorter for you. You will notice that there is no categorization in section B anymore. So those of you that might have had a section on academic appointments and maybe memberships and things like that. All of that is all in one section now, so just be aware that there isn't any subsections anymore. However many positions and appointments you want to put in there, you are required to select one as your primary appointment or position. Whichever one you select will be put at the top of the list, regardless of whether it's in reverse chronological order. And that one that you select will also be at the top of your Biosketch as your title. So for those of you that maybe had titles that were combinations of multiple titles that you held, now you have to select one of them. So the system is going to enforce this selection. For appointments and positions, the start date is required, but the end date is not. If you leave the end date blank, it will just add that it is to the present. So just be aware that that will also affect the ordering in which things show up in section B. Moving on to section C, products. Here we have one of the biggest changes for the Common Form Biosketch, at least for those of you applying to the NIH. So in the section, you are allowed to list up to 5 closely related publications or products to the proposed project, meaning for whichever application you're currently submitting for, those first 5 publications should be relevant to that. And then you can include up to 5 other significant products that highlight your contributions to science, which you will talk about later in the supplement. So you'll notice this means you can only list 10 publications total across your entire Biosketch. So you are no longer allowed to include products or citations in your personal statement. You're not allowed to include them in your contribution to science. The only place where we are going to find your publications is in this products section. So why do we keep calling it products? Just a reminder, a research product obviously includes peer-reviewed publications, which is probably what most of you will be including, but it can also include things like conference papers, presentations, websites. Patents are a really common one to include. So any of those things really can fit and be cited if you'd like. Regardless of whichever type of product you wish to cite, you are required to include the full citation. So what that means is that all of the author's names, the title, date, etc. The guidelines in Science CV say that the URL is required for a full citation. This may be a little bit confusing because the NIH typically does not allow you to have URLs in any part of the application, but the system will actually include this if you're pulling information in automatically from My Bibliography and ORCID. And the URL really only applies to citations that have URLs. So if you've published a chapter in a book, it's obviously not going to have a URL. So it's really only required if and when it applies to the full citation style. And if you're not sure about that, one of the benefits of Science CV is that you can manage your My Bibliography, and that allows you to add different types of products. And within there, if you select patent, for instance, it'll give you the fields that you need. But once you've done all that, presumably you're doing this before you're actually building your Biosketch, it will automatically pull in whatever you have in My Bibliography and allow you to select up to 5 products, either from your My Bibliography tab or your ORCID tab. It'll gray out the rest once you've hit that 5. And just a heads up that the order in which you select your publications is the order in which they will appear on the final Biosketch. So if you want them to appear in a particular order, make sure that's how you're clicking it. We have also noticed that faculty who have large amounts of publications, it can take a little bit of time for Science CV to load all of that information. So just be aware, it may take some time to load. So after you've completed these components, that is essentially the whole of the Common Form Biosketch. So those of you that have current NIH Biosketches, you'll notice there's a lot of pieces that are missing here. So to address that, the NIH has added a supplement. The supplement is specific to the NIH. The good thing is that when you're building it within Science CV, it will immediately come after all of these sections of the Common Form, so you fill it out all together. The supplement has 3 major components, which is the personal statement, the honors, and the contributions to science. As a reminder, the personal statement is limited to 3,500 characters. That's about 3/4 of a page. It does not allow you to include citations. And just a heads up that the Science EV guidelines say that the system does not support formatting, but we have noticed that if you are using basic HTML coding, you can do some formatting, although the HTML coding does count towards your character limit, so just be aware that that is a limitation. So as a reminder on the personal statement, again, the guidelines are essentially the same as they've been previously. The personal statement is your opportunity to explain your qualifications and relevance for the project. Those relevant factors can include anything from training to expertise to, your collaborators and scientific appointments, or environment. Anything like that that really speaks to your qualifications for the application that you're applying to. Also, anything not mentioned in contributions, maybe you ran out of space for it, can always be put in the personal statement. The one thing that I've crossed out here, again, I'm just going to reiterate, they do not want you to put citations in this section, but you can still include research support that you would like to highlight, up to 3 years, but those lists of research support should fit or have to fit within the 3,500 character limit. So just be aware that that can take up a decent amount of space, but certainly allowable for you to include that if you'd like. So just some general guidelines on the personal statement. If this is your first time doing it, you want to briefly describe why you're well suited for your whatever your role or roles on the project. You want to address a break in productivity if you've had it. So if you've had maternity leave, military service, that has caused you to have sort of a gap in your research career, definitely explain it here. And then just make sure that you're not expanding on any existing materials that should be in other parts of the NIH application. So make sure you're not circumventing page limitations here. After the personal statement, we have section B, honors. And the honor section, as I mentioned earlier, it is limited to 15 entries and must include your licensures and board certifications if you have them. If you are a postdoc, junior faculty, early stage investigator, somebody that's early in their career, this is also where you would want to list your scholarship, traineeship, fellowship, and development awards. So again, like the appointments and positions, you do have to put in a year, although you don't have to put in the specific month. And then the end year is optional. So again, it will list these in reverse chronological order for you. And it does limit you to 15. So for some of you that have a lot of honors and a lot of licensures and things like that, you may have to figure out how to creatively edit your current list. The last section for the supplement is the contribution to science. So same as the previous version, you can have up to 5. And you don't have to use all 5, certainly, but you can have up to 5. Each one is limited to 2,000 characters. And again, just reiterating, you cannot include citations in the section, but you can reference any citations you've put in your product section. So what does this mean? It really means that the NIH is looking for you to engage with and talk about those 5 publications that you have cited as other significant products in that Common Form Biosketch, weaving them into the contribution to science section. And just a heads up that although you can have up to 5 contributions, you do not have to use all 5, but you are required to include at least 1. So if you have a key personnel on your grant who really doesn't have contributions, they'll still have to fill out this section, but you could, according to the NIH, put NA or not applicable in the description and then just save it, just to be able to finalize the Biosketch. And then as you see with the little up-down icons here, you're allowed to rearrange the order of those contributions to science. So again, just a refresher, contributions to science, the guidelines are essentially the same. You're briefly describing up to 5 of your most significant contributions. Within each contribution, you can talk about, the historical background, the central findings of your work, what the influence of those findings has been on your field, and then what role you played in that contribution. Again, one of the things that was removed here is that there is no place for you to upload a URL that links to a list or full list of your published works. However, once you link your ORCID ID, that ORCID ID link will be active. So reviewers could click on that link, take them to your ORCID profile and be able to see publications there. So it's not entirely disappearing, but you're not able to add, say, your My Bibliography link here. And then just a reminder, the NIH guidelines state that the contributions to science do not have to be related to the proposed application, though they certainly can be. So I want to talk a little bit about the contribution to science and how it relates to the product. So as I mentioned, you can reference up to 5 of the other significant products that you've cited in your Common Form Biosketch and put them within the text of the contribution. NIH suggests that to make it easier for reviewers to understand that you should include something like the title, author, publication, year of publication for ease of reference. However, they do not want you to provide the full citation. And just a clarification that you can also include products that are under development. So again, if you're working on, say, a journal article, you've submitted it to the journal, you just haven't gotten back confirmation that they're publishing it yet, you can write about the work that you're doing in the contribution. You just would not include the full citation, which you wouldn't have yet, right? Because you don't know the volume, the issue number, whatever. So products under development can be mentioned here because they cannot be cited in the common form Biosketch. So for those of you that may be approaching contribution science for the first time, here's some techniques to consider. You can provide a title for each contribution, clarifying your particular role. Don't use all 5 if you can't think of 5 contributions. And you can be creative about what contribution could be. It could be a seminal paper, a single study, a series of papers and studies. It's really up to you to determine what that contribution is. And then it's always helpful, I think, to emphasize the impact and innovation of each contribution. Early stage investigators, some additional techniques you can think about are describing work that you've done in other people's labs and then specifying what your role was. You can talk about your current training if that's all you have to go on. Getting together with other junior investigators to talk about how best to describe your contributions when you may not feel like you have a lot of contributions yet. It can be really helpful talking with your peers. And then not necessarily overemphasizing your importance, but like clarifying what your role is within each contribution. And then just be creative with your limitations and talk about what you are currently engaging with. Similar to that, the NIH also offers some advice for new scientists when crafting the section, but again, it's consulting colleagues and external reviewers, understanding that your contributions to science are evaluated based on seniority. If you only have one publication, they suggest summarizing the key findings and the importance of that publication. If you don't have any publications, they say that you should have one contribution describing your efforts on others, projects, and papers. And if you have no research or thesis experience at all, just use the one contribution to list your training to date. So after you've done all of this, the last step for the Science CV, Biosketch, and the supplement is the certification process. So as I mentioned, if you have a delegate, they cannot certify this Biosketch for you. You have to do it. Downloading the PDF will bring up a little button that says certify for you, and you'll be able to download a certified version. That certified version will have a little time-stamped signature on it. For purposes of submitting to the NIH, they say that it has to be within the last 12 months. I would check with your sponsored projects office because they might want it to be more recent than 12 months, but that's the minimum. And then if you are unsure if you have downloaded a certified version, if it's not certified, it will have a draft watermark on it. Your delegates can certainly download drafts for you to review offline. This can be particularly beneficial because the text systems for the personal statement, the contribution to science, do not check things like spelling mistakes. So if you would like to look things over visually before certifying, you can certainly do that by viewing the draft. Since we are doing this presentation in January, we've begun to get a few different questions. So I added a frequently asked questions section, and I'm just going to briefly go through some of these in case these are questions you guys might have. So can I make edits after downloading and certifying my Biosketch? The answer is no, because once it is downloaded by the user, it is considered certified and you are not allowed to make changes after the fact. So if you are realizing that there are errors or edits that need to be made, they do need to be made back in Science EV. The NIH has indicated that on or after February 6th, the system will be able to identify whether a Biosketch has been certified, meaning it'll know if it's been edited offline. So we just say it's safer, just go into Science EV, make your edits there, recertify, re-download. Can I reference or cite publications in the personal statement? As of right now, there is nothing in the instructions saying that you can do this. So most administrators have found that To be on the safe side, you should not be including citations here because the only place it appears to be allowed is in the product section. A lot of people are having trouble with not seeing all of their publications in ORCID or Science EV. This can be due to a number of factors. If you have had multiple accounts, if you've used multiple email addresses and some publications are under one email address but not the other, if you have publications that do not show up automatically in PubMed, maybe because they are books instead of peer-reviewed journal articles, those could all be reasons that this is happening. So it's good to understand why this might be happening, but if you are missing publications, you can manually add them to Science EV, hit refresh and have them pull up, but a lot of times you will probably need to reach out to the ORCID or Science EV help desks. I'll have a slide next, and a few slides on that. Can a delegate download my Biosketch? Yes, they can download a draft version of your Biosketch, or if you, as the owner of the Biosketch, have certified your Biosketch and not made any changes once that certification happens, the delegate can download that certified version, but will not be able to do that if you have not certified your own Biosketch. And then again, can I change the formatting of my Biosketch? That's kind of like the first question, but essentially you can't change a lot of the formatting. It's, I understand that the Biosketches come in Times New Roman and most of us prefer to use Arial. Can't really change any of that. Within the text features in the personal statement contribution to science, you can use, limited simple HTML coding to try and do some simple formatting. But what it comes out as is how it comes out, and that's really not a lot of wiggle room on the formatting. So here are some resources that you can access, including the GSU website. We are continuing to keep that up to date as we get clarifications and updates from the NIH. I've also provided links to just the common form rules and guidelines that are held on the NSF website. If you need help accessing Science EV, etc. I am also linking to the NIH FAQs here because I feel that this is a really great place to check for updates. So if you have a question, chances are other people are also having the same question. And so the FAQs are being updated fairly frequently. So you can find a lot of more nuanced conversations there. So I would recommend checking that pretty regularly. Where to go for help? Other than emailing me, which I'll give you some contact information at the end, you can contact Science EV for Science EV questions. If you are watching this presentation and you are at UCLA, the UCLA Biomed Library has some great contacts that are super helpful and willing to help troubleshoot issues with you. If the issue is an ORCID issue, there's a help desk for that. And then again, if you are at UCLA and you need help with your ERA Commons account, then there is help for that as well. So depending on what your challenge is, there are numerous avenues to help support you. So that is my presentation. Thank you for coming. Please feel free to email or contact the GSU if you have any additional questions or need support, and best of luck.